A wild Mustang abandoned at birth a 15-year-old girl who dared to do the impossible. When Charlie Johnson found the dying foe in the harsh Wyoming wilderness, she made a choice that would change everything. Against all odds, against every expert opinion, she brought him home. The foe won't survive the night. They said even if he does, you can't tame a wild Mustang, they warned. But what happened next shocked everyone. Even the hardened government agents who came to take him away. This is the incredible story of Charlie and Comet, the orphaned Mustang, who formed a bond so powerful, so extraordinary, that it defied all expectations and ultimately saved an entire community from disaster. In a moment of crisis when lives hung in the balance, this wild-born horse did something no domestic horse would ever do, something no one could have predicted. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The wind howls across the barren plains of Wyoming, dust swirling beneath the hooves of a wild Mustang herd. As they gallop through the valley, their power and freedom evident in every stride among them. A heavily pregnant Mayare struggles to keep pace, her sign heaving with exhaustion. Charlie Johnson stands on the ridge, binoculars pressed to her eyes, her breath visible in the cold spring air. At 15, she knows these horses better than most adults. In Meadowbrook, she spent countless hours watching them, studying them, understanding them in ways that make the other kids at school call her weird. Come on, she whispers. Seeing the mare fall behind, keep going, but nature follows it. Own rules, the herd continues forward, leaving the struggling mare behind as she stops, paws at the ground, and then slowly collapses onto her side. Charlie's heart races. No, no, no. She fumbles for her phone, dialing with trembling fingers. Grandpa, the mayor from the North herd. She's fing early. I'm at Falcon Ridge. Shapus is listening. I know I'm not supposed to interfere, but something's wrong, I can tell. She ends the call and stares down at the scene below. The mare is thrashing now, clearly in distress. Everything Charlie knows about horses tells her this isn't right. I'm sorry, Grandpa, she mutters, stuffing the phone in her pocket and scrambling down the rocky slope, sending small avalanches of pebbles ahead of her. By the time she reaches the mire, it's too late. The beautiful wild horse lies still, her eyes vacant. The half-born foe partially emerged. Charlie's vision blurs with tears as she kneels beside them. Then she notices a slight movement. The FO is still alive, drawing a deep breath. Charlie does what she'd seen her grandfather do countless times in his veterinary practice, working quickly. She helps deliver the foe, a tiny colt with a deep chestnut coat and a perfect white star on his forehead. Come on, little guy, she whispers, rubbing his chest vigorously with her jacket. The foe's breathing is labored, too shallow. He's premature, weak fight after what feels like eternity. The foe sputters and takes a stronger breath. His eyes, impossibly large and dark, focus on Charlie for a brief moment before closing again. He's alive, but barely. Charlie hears the distant rumble of her grandfather's truck. She looks around desperately. The herd is long gone, the foe without. His mother's warmth and milk will die within hours. The spring nights in Wyoming are still freezing. Albert Johnson's weathered face appears over the ridge, concern etched deep into his features. At 68, the former veterinarian has seen just about everything the wild can offer, but the sight before him stops him cold. Charlie, what have you done? The mare was dying. I couldn't just watch, Charlie explains, still cradling. The fall, the herd abandoned them. He'll die out here. Albert approaches slowly, examining the dead mire with practiced eyes. Sometimes that's nature's way. Charlie, no. Charlie's voice is firm. Beyond her 15 years, he deserves a chance. Albert sigh, crouching beside his granddaughter. He gently examines the trembling foe, his experienced hands running along the spindly legs, checking the heartbeat. He's premature, Albert confirms. Needs colostrum right away. Even then his chances aren't good. But there is a chance. Albert meets Charlie's determined gaze, seeing so much of her mother and her late father in those eyes. A small one, he admits. But Charlie, this isn't like rescuing a stray cat. This is a wild Mustang. These horses are protected. There are laws that would let him die. Charlie challenges. Albert glances at the darkening sky. We need to move the mare away from the herd's territory. If we take him, we need to do this right. He pauses. And you need to understand, even if he survives, he can never truly be ours. Charlie nods relief. Washing over her, I understand. Together, they wrap the foe in blankets. Albert carries him to the truck, while Charlie follows her eyes. Never leaving the tiny creature, I'm calling Dr. Fernandez, Albert says as they drive back to their small ranch. She needs to examine him. Immediately, Charlie doesn't respond, too focused on keeping the full, warm, whispering encouragement as his breathing grows more labored back at the ranch. Dr. Teresa Fernandez arrives within the hour, her face gray as she examines the F in the warm kitchen. The tiny Mustang lies on a makeshift bed of blankets, his eyes closed, barely moving. He's severely underweight and hypothermic. Dr. Fernandez says, preparing an IV line. The lung development is minimal. I've seen domestic foes in better condition not make it through the night, but you've seen some survive. Charlie presses Dr. Fernandez, give her a gentle look. Charlie, I need you to be prepared. The odds aren't in his favor. I'm not asking about odds, Charlie insists. I'm asking if it's possible. The veterinarian sigh. Yes, it's possible, but Charlie, even if he survives, you need to understand something. This is a wild Mustang. They don't domesticate like regular horses. Their spirit is different. I'm not trying to break his spirit, Charlie says quietly. I just want to give him a chance to live. Dr. Fernandez administers antibiotics and fluids while instructing Charlie and Albert on tube feeding the FO with acolostrum replacement. The night stretches ahead filled with uncertainty. I'll be back in the morning, Doctor. Fernandez says, packing her equipment. Call me if anything changes. He needs to be fed. Every 2 hours through the night, she pauses at the door. And Charlie, you need to contact the BEL tomorrow. They need to know about the mayor and about him. After she leaves, Albert touches Charlie's shoulder. I'll take the first shift. You need some sleep. Charlie shakes her head. I found him. He's my responsibility. Albert recognizes the stubborn set of her jaw. All right, but I'm staying up with you. They settle in for the long night, the kitchen becoming a makeshift intensive care unit. Charlie talks to the FO, constantly telling him stories, promising him adventures. If he just keeps fighting, what will you name him? Albert asks in the early hours of the morning. They prepare another bottle. Charlie watches the foe, his chest rising and falling in the soft light. Comet, she says finally, because he fell from the sky when I needed him most. Albert raises an eyebrow, but doesn't question her further. Dawn Comet has survived the night, defying the first prediction. He's taken several feedings, his breathing steadier, though still weak as the sun rises. Charlie helps him stand for the first time on wobbling legs that seem too long for his small body. And she encourages as he teeters precariously. You've got this. Albert watches from the doorway, a complex mixture of pride and worry on his face. Dr. Fernandez will be impressed, he admits. But Charlie, don't get too attached. The BLM might. I know, Charlie interrupts, but right now he needs us. Word spreads quickly in Meadowbrook by noon. Sheriff John Howard's patrol car pulls up outside the Johnson Ranch. The sheriff, Isa, reasonable man who's known Albert for decades, but he's also bound by the law, he says, nodding to Albert on the porch. Charlie, I heard about the FO Nostra S fast. Albert comments. Small town Sheriff Howard replies, look, I'm not here officially, but I thought you should know. Craig Evans saw you bringing that FO home. He's already called the BLM. Charlie steps forward. The mayor was dead, Sheriff. He would have died. To Sheriff Howard softened slightly. I believe you, Charlie, but that doesn't change the fact that wild horses are protected. The BLM has jurisdiction here. So, they'd rather he died out there, Charlie demands. Albert places a hand on her shoulder. Charlie, Sheriff Howard. Sigh. I'm just giving you a heads up. Steve Harrison from the regional office will probably be out here today or tomorrow. Be straight with him. Document everything. Show that you did what you had to do to save the animal. Thank you, Sheriff, Albert says after he leaves. Charlie returns to Comet, who's sleeping beside the wood stove. His little body seems stronger already, but she knows they're not out of the woods yet. We need to document his care, Albert says, bringing in his old veterinary camera, photos, videos, feeding schedules, medication logs, everything. Charlie nods, already planning how to prove they acted humanely and responsibly that afternoon. Melissa Johnson calls from Argentina, where she's photographing wildlife for National Geographic. Charlie tells everything while watching Comet attempt to stand again. Oh, Charlie. Her mother sighed through the phone. You've always had your father's heart. For lost causes, he's not a lost cause. Charlie insists he's getting stronger every hour. I know, sweetheart, but taking care of a FO is a huge commitment, especially a wild one. And if the BLM decides, I know what they might decide, Charlie interrupts, but I couldn't leave him there. There's a pause, then Melissa says, softly, "No, you couldn't. You're too much like your dad for that." Another pause. "I'll try to get back sooner." "My assignment ends next week. We're fine, Mom." Grandpa's helping after saying, "Goodbye." Charlie helps Comet with another feeding, cradling his head in her lap as he drinks. From the bottle, his dark eyes now watch her with what she imagines is curiosity. "Don't worry," she whispers. "I won't let them take you away." The following morning, while Charlie is teaching Comet to drink from a bucket, a government vehicle pulls into the driveway. Albert intercepts Steve Harrison, the BLM field officer, on the porch. Charlie can see them talking through the window, her grandfather's hand gestures becoming more animated. Finally, Albert opens the door. "Charlie, Mr. Harrison needs to see Comet." Steve Harrison is a tall man with a weathered face and official-looking clipboard. His expression is carefully neutral as he surveys the scene. A wild Mustang of foal drinking from a bucket in someone's kitchen. "Miss Johnson," he acknowledges, "I understand you remove this foal from public land." Charlie straightens up. His mother died during birth. The herd left them both. He would have died. Harrison kneels to examine Comet, who shies away, pressing against Charlie's legs. "He's from the Thunder Basin herd." Harrison notes, "We've been monitoring them. The mare was in poor condition. That's why she couldn't deliver properly." Albert explains, "Charlie found them during the birth. The mare was already gone." Harrison makes notes on his clipboard. "You have documentation?" Albert produces the photos, videos, and detailed logs they've kept. Harrison reviews them carefully. His expression, unreadable. "The protocol is to notify us immediately." He says finally, "He wouldn't have survived the wait." Charlie argues, "He was hypothermic and couldn't breathe properly." Harrison looks at her for a long moment. "You understand that wild horses are federally protected. You can't just decide to keep him?" "I know the law." Charlie replies, her voice steadier than she feels, "But I also know he deserves to live." Harrison sigh. "Here's what's going to happen. Dr. Fernandez will need to submit official documentation of the F's condition. You'll need to apply for an emergency foster care permit, which is temporary. The BLM will evaluate whether rehabilitation and release is possible, or if he's eligible for the adoption program. And if we don't get approved." Albert asks. Harrison's expression hardens slightly. "Then he'll be relocated to a BLM facility." Charlie feels the floor shift beneath her, but he's still recovering. "He needs consistent care. That's why I'm not removing him today," Harrison explains, "but make no mistake. Miss Johnson, this foe belongs to the American people, not to you." After Harrison leaves with copies of their documentation, Charlie sinks to the floor beside Comet, who nuzzles her hand, seeking comfort. "He can't take him," she whispers. Bert sits beside her. "Charlie, we always knew this was a possibility, but Comet knows me. He trusts me, and that might be what saves him." Albert says gently, "If we can prove you're the best chance he has for rehabilitation, we might get approved as fosterers." Charlie looks at the tiny FO now curling up against her. "What if that's not enough?" Albert has no answer for her. Outside, the Wyoming wind picks up, rattling the windows of the old ranch house. Inside, Charlie makes a silent promise to the orphaned Mustang. Whatever happens, she won't give up on him. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. Days stretch into weeks, and against all odds, Comet survives. Charlie keeps meticulous records of his program. Reese, the first time he manages to stand for more than a few minutes, the day he graduates from bottle to bucket. The morning he trots across the kitchen without stumbling. Each milestone feels like a victory against the ticking clock of the BLM's pending decision. Albert stands in the doorway watching Charlie coax Comet into drinking from a bigger bucket. He's doubled his weight, he observes. Dr. Fernandez will be impressed. Charlie doesn't look up. She already is. She said she's never seen a premature recover this quickly. "You know, we can't keep him in the house forever, right?" Albert says gently. "He's getting bigger." Every day, Charlie's hands pause on Comet's neck. The foe is already nearly 3 times the size he was when she found him. His spindly legs growing sturdier, his chestnut coat beginning to shine with health. "I know," she admits, "but the nights are still too cold in the bar." Albert sighs. "Charlie, I've been thinking. Maybe we should prepare for the possibility that." "Don't say it." Charlie interrupts, her voice tight. "We're doing everything right. The application is Perfect. Dr. Fernandez is supporting us. I'm just saying we need to be ready. The BLM doesn't always. The sound of tires on gravel interrupts him through the window. They see Dr. Fernandez's truck pulling up. When they open the door, the veterinarian's expression is uncharacteristically bright. I have news, she announces, stepping inside and crouching immediately to examine Comet, who nibbles curiously at her stethoscope. Amazing progress, she murmurs, running her hands along his legs and barrel. I've never seen anything like it. What's the news? Charlie asks impatiently. Dr. Fernandez straightens up. I spoke with Steve Harris yesterday. Your application is being reviewed by Director Spencer herself. Is that good or bad? Albert asks. It could be very good. Dr. Fernandez replies. Judith Spencer has been pushing for more progressive rehabilitation approaches for orphaned FOS, and she's interested in your case specifically. Charlie, mine. Charlie blinks in surprise. The documentation you've been keeping is exceptional. The bond you formed with Comet is unusual for a wild Mustang. She hesitates. Harrison mentioned that Director Spencer might be coming to evaluate the situation personally. Charlie's stomach flips. When possibly next week. But Charlie, Dr. Fernandez's voice grows serious. You need to prepare him for life outside. He needs to start spending time in the paddock interacting with your grandfather's horse. The more he behaves like a normal, healthy foal, the better. Your chances. Charlie nods, though the thought of Comet leaving the safety of the house makes her anxious. I'll start today. Dr. Fernandez smiles. That's not all. I've asked Professor Thomas Green from the University of Wyoming to consult on Comet's case. He's an expert in wild horse behavior and rehabilitation. He's very interested in your approach, my approach. Charlie X goes the way you've bonded with him without breaking his spirit. It's unusual. Charlie, most rehabilitation attempts with Mustangs involve a lot more. She searches for the right word. Conventional training methods after Dr. Fernandez leaves. Charlie leads Comet to the door. The FO has never been outside except for brief trips to a small fenced area for bathroom breaks. Now he hesitates at the threshold, nostrils flaring at the flood of new scents. It's okay, Charlie encourages, one step at a time. Comet places one hoof outside, then quickly retreats, pressing against Charlie's legs. He's afraid. Albert observes from behind them. He just needs time. Charlie replies, stroking Comet's neck. Come on, boy. I'll be right here with you eventually. With gentle coaxing, Comet ventures onto the porch, his ears swiveling in all directions. Tails swishing nervously, Charlie leads him slowly toward the small paddock near the barn, where Albert's elderly quarter horse, Duke, watches with mild interest. You think Duke will accept him? Charlie asks her grandfather. Albert nods. Duke's good with youngsters, might be just what Comet needs, another horse to teach him how to be a horse. Comet's introduction to Duke goes better than expected. The older horse approaches the fence line, nickering softly. Comet hides behind Charlie at first, but curiosity gradually overcomes fear by late afternoon. He's mimicking Duke's movements, grazing alongside the fence that separates them. See that? Albert points. He's learning already. Charlie feels a complicated mix of pride and sadness each step. Comet takes toward normal horse behavior, is a step away from the complete dependence he's had on her that night for the first time. Charlie prepares a stall in the barn for Comet. She adds extra bedding, a heat lamp, and even brings his favorite blanket from the house. It's just across the yard, she tells him, stroking his star-marked forehead. I'll come check on you during the night. Leaving him is harder than she expected. Comet whines as she walks away, the plaintive sound following her all the way back to the house. He'll be fine, Albert assures her, though his own expression is concerned. He needs to learn independence. Charlie barely sleeps, getting up every 2 hours to check on him. Each time she finds Comet standing alert in his stall, eyes fixed on the door as if he'd been waiting for her by morning. Charlie is exhausted but relieved Comet has survived his first night away from her. It's a small victory, but it feels significant. The next few days establish a new routine. Comet spends mornings in the paddock with Duke, learning horse behavior and building strength. Afternoons are dedicated to what Charlie calls education, gentle exercises to help Comet overcome his fear of common objects and build trust. Word spreads through Meadowbrook about the orphaned Mustang. For some neighbors like Margaret Palmer from the feed store drop by with supplies and encouragement. My father used to tell stories about gentling wild Mustangs. Margaret says, watching Charlie work with Comet in the paddock, said they had a different look in their eye than domestic horses, more knowing others are less supportive. Craig Evans, whose ranch borders the Johnsons' property, makes no secret of his disapproval. Wild horses are vermin, he declares loudly at the diner in town, compete with cattle for grazing. Tear up fences. That Johnson girl's wasting her time on that Mustang. BLM should just take it and be done. His daughter, Madeline, a year older than Charlie and worlds apart in personality roles here, yes, behind her father's back. Later she corners Charlie outside the feed store. Is it true, she asks, you're raising a wild Mustang in your house? He's in the barn now. Charlie corrects, but yeah, I rescued him after his mother died. Madeline's expression is unreadable. My dad says wild horses can't be tamed. I'm not trying to tame him. Charlie replies, I'm trying to give him a chance at life. Madeline seems to consider this. Can I see him sometime? The question surprises Charlie. Melin Evans has never shown interest in anything Charlie does at school. They exist in completely different social circles, sure. Charlie finds herself saying, come whenever you want on Saturday morning. Charlie is surprised to see Madeline's bike leaning against the fence. The rancher's daughter stands awkwardly in the yard, dressed inappropriately in designer jeans and spotless boots. I didn't think you'd actually come, Charlie admits. Madeline shrugs. Dad's at a cattleman's meeting. Thought I'd see what all the fuss is about. Charlie leads her to the paddock where Comet is practicing his newest skill, trotting in circles around Duke, who tolerates the youngster with equine patience. He's smaller than I expected. Madeline observes. He was premature. Charlie explains, but he's growing fast. They watch in silence for a few minutes before Madeline asks, can I touch him? Charlie hesitates. Comet is still wary of strangers. Let's see if he'll come to you. Follow my lead. She demonstrates the approach she's developed. Slow, low, calm, with no direct eye contact. To Charlie's surprise, Comet responds to Madeline almost immediately, stretching his neck to sniff her outstretched hand. He likes you, Charlie says, not entirely keeping the surprise from her voice. Madeline's usually composed face breaks into a genuine smile as Comet allows her to stroke his neck. He's so soft, something shifts between the girls in that moment. Not friendship exactly, but a bridge across the divide that has always separated them. My dad doesn't understand, Madeline says suddenly, about wild horses. I mean, he just sees them as competition for grazing rights. Charlie nods cautiously. A lot of ranchers feel that way. But they were here first, weren't they, before the cattle before us? There's a thoughtfulness in Madeline's voice that Charlie hasn't heard before. Yeah, Charlie agrees. They were. The sound of an approaching vehicle interrupts them. Albert emerges from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. Charlie, he calls. Professor Green is here. The man who steps from the university-marked truck isn't what Charlie expected. Professor Thomas Green is younger than his reputation suggests, with quick eyes that immediately focus on Comet in the paddock, the famous Orphaned Mustang, he says by way of greeting, and his rescuer. He extends a hand to Charlie. Thomas Green, your vet speaks highly of you. Charlie shakes his hand nervously. Dr. Fernandez says you're an expert on wild horse behavior. I've studied them for 15 years, he confirms, but I've never seen a case quite like yours. Mind if I observe him for a bit? For the next hour, Professor Green watches Comet interact with Duke, with Charlie, and even with Madeline, who surprisingly stays for the entire visit. He takes notes, occasionally asking questions about Comet's routines and behaviors. The most interesting thing, he finally says, is how he's maintained wild instincts while forming such strong human attachments. Usually it's one or the other. Is that good? Charlie asks anxiously. Professor Green considers it's unusual from a rehabilitation standpoint. It could be very valuable. The idea is preserving natural behaviors while allowing enough domestication for safe handling. He pauses. I'd like to document his progress. If you're willing, it could help other orphaned FS in the future. Charlie's heart lifts. If university professor thinks Comet's Cass is special, maybe the BLM will too. Of course, after Professor Green leaves, promising to return in a few days, Madeline helps Charlie with Comet afternoon feeding. The professor seemed impressed. Madeline observes. Charlie nods. I hope the BLM director will be too. Melon hesitates before saying, my dad mentioned that Director Spencer is tough. She doesn't usually make special exceptions. Charlie's stomach tightens. What else did your dad say? Madeline looks uncomfortable. Just that the BLM might use your case to set an example about people in interfering with wild horses. I didn't interfere. Charlie argues I saved him. There's a difference, I know that Madeline says quickly, but the rules don't always care about the difference that evening. Charlie sits with Comet in his stall, worry gnawing at her. The foe rests his head in her lap, eyes half closed in contentment. We have to convince them, she whispers, stroking his fur. Look, we have to show them you're special. Albert finds her there an hour later, curled up beside the sleeping foe. Charlie, he says gently, come inside, you've got school tomorrow. Charlie doesn't move. What if they take him? Grandpa Albert sighs, settling onto the straw beside her. Then we fight it, we appeal, we do everything we can. He pauses, but Charlie, you need to prepare yourself sometimes, even when we do everything right. Things don't work out the way we want. That's not fair. Charlie whispers no. Albert agrees it's not. They sit in silence, watching Comet breathe, his small sides rising and falling in the dim light of the barn. Your dad used to say that the measure of love isn't how much you want to keep something, Albert says finally. It's how much you're willing to let it go if that's what's best. Charlie's eyes burn with unshed tears. How could taking Comet away be what's for him? Albert has no answer, and Charlie doesn't really expect one. Some questions don't have satisfying answers, especially when the heart is involved. Monday brings a school day that Charlie can barely focus through during lunch. She sits alone as usual, sketching Comet in her notebook. Instead of eating, is that him, the Mustang? Charlie looks up to find Emlyn standing beside her table, lunch tray in hand. Several of mine's usual friends watch from across the cafeteria. Expressions curious, yeah? Charlie says cautiously. To her surprise, Malene sits down. Have you heard anything from the BLM yet? Charlie shakes her head. Professor Green is coming back tomorrow, and Dr. Fernandez thinks Director Spencer might visit this week. Meline taps her perfectly manicured nails on the table. You know, my mom used to be involved with a wild horse sanctuary in Nevada before she married my dad. This is news to Charlie. Craig Evans is notoriously anti-Mustang. Really? Millie nods. She doesn't talk about it much anymore, but she has connections, people who advocate for wild horse protection. She hesitates. Maybe she could help. Charlie stares at her, confused by this unexpected alliance. Why would you want to help me? Madeline looks genuinely offended. Because I'm not my father, Charlie, and because I've seen how special Comet is after school. Charlie rushes home to find Professor Green's truck already parked in the driveway inside the barn. He's setting up recording equipment while Albert looks on with interest. Ah, Charlie. Professor Green greets her. Perfect timing. I want to document Comet's interactions with you. His responses are quite remarkable. For the next 2 hours, Charlie goes through their daily routine while Professor Green records everything. Comet seems to enjoy the attention, showing off his growing coordination and responding to Charlie's voice commands with enthusiasm. The level of trust is extraordinary, Professor Green comments. Most Mustangs never achieve this kind of comfort with humans, even after years of training. Charlie beams with pride. He knows I'd never hurt him precisely. Professor Green packs up his equipment. That's what makes this case so valuable from a research perspective. You've achieved connection without domination. He pauses. Director Spencer will be here on Thursday. I'll be joining her if that's all right. Charlie's heart skips. Thursday? That's so soon. I've shared my preliminary observations with her. Professor Green continues. She's very interested. Is that good or war bad? Albert asks, echoing his question from days earlier. Professor Green's expression turns diplomatic. Judith Spencer is fair, but she's bound by regulations. Your case doesn't fit neatly into existing frameworks. He glances at Comet, who's now playing with a ball Charlie introduced him to yesterday that said, I believe there's merit in exploring new approaches to orphaned F rehabilitation. I've told her as much. After he leaves, Charlie focuses on preparing for Thursday's visit. She reviews all their documentation, cleans Comet's stall until it shines, and runs through every exercise they've practiced. You're going to wear him out, Albert warns. As Charlie leads Comet through his paces for the third time that day, I just want everything to be perfect, she replies. Albert places a hand on her shoulder. Charlie, you've done everything POS possible. Now we just have to trust that they'll see what we see. That night, Charlie can't sleep. She tosses and turns, imagining worst-case scenarios around midnight. She gives up and heads to the barn in her pajamas and boots. Comet whickers softly when she enters, immediately coming to the stall door to greet her. "Hey boy," she whispers. Letting herself into the stall, she sits against the wall and Comet settles beside her, his warm body a comfort against the cool night air. "I'm so scared," she admits to the darkness. "I'm scared. They'll take you away. I'm scared." You won't understand why she strokes his neck, feeling his steady pulse beneath her fingers. "You're not just any horse, you're special, and I need them to see." That Comet shifts, resting his head in her lap in the moonlight, filtering through the barn window. His eyes seem to hold understanding beyond his weeks of life. "Whatever happens, Charlie. Promises I'll always fight for you," as she sits there finding peace in the simple rhythm of Comet's breathing. She doesn't notice the figure watching. From the barn door, Albert. His weathered face is soft with concern and pride for his granddaughter, who loves so fiercely, so completely, that it might just be enough to change minds hardened by rules and regulations. Thursday dawns. Clear and bright, the Wyoming spring finally, asserting itself against the lingering winter chill. Charlie is up before the sun, making sure everything is perfect for the BLM director's visit. "Charlie, you need to eat something," Albert insists, setting a plate of toast on the kitchen table. "You can't run on nerves all day." Charlie takes a distracted bite, her mind already racing ahead to the meeting. "What time did they say they'd be here?" 10 wam. Albert replies, watching her with concern. "Charlie, I want you to prepare yourself. No matter what happens today." I know, she interrupts. "I need to be ready for any outcome," but the truth is, she isn't ready, not at all. At precisely 10. Two vehicles pull into the driveway. Professor Green University truck and a government SUV with official markings. Charlie takes a deep breath, straightens her shirt, and steps onto the porch. Professor Green emerges first, followed by Steve Harrison, and a woman Charlie assumes must be Director Judith Spencer. She's tall with silver streak hair pulled back in the severe bun and carries herself with unmistakable authority. "Miss Johnson," she says, extending her hand. "I'm Director Spencer. I understand you've been caring for an orphaned Mustang foal." Charlie shakes her hand, suddenly aware of her arms sweating. "Yes, ma'am, Comet. He's in the paddock with our quarter-horse Duke." Director Spencer nods. "Professor Green has shared his observations with me. I'd like to see for myself." As they walk toward the paddock, Charlie can't help but notice Director Spencer studying her. As much as the surroundings, it feels like being under a microscope. Comet trots to the fence when he sees Charlie nickering softly, despite her nerves. Charlie smiles at High's enthusiasm. "That's unusual behavior for a Mustang," Director Spencer remarks. "Even a young one, Comet special," Charlie replies, unable to keep the pride from her voice. "He's smart and curious, learns really fast." For the next hour, Charlie demonstrates everything Comet has learned: how he responds to voice commands, how he overcomes fear with encouragement, how he interacts with Duke and with humans throughout. Director Spencer takes note, her expression revealing nothing. Finally, she turns to Professor Green. "Your assessment, as I mentioned in my report," he replies. "This case presents unique opportunities for studying Mustang rehabilitation methods. Charlie's approach is yielding remarkable results." Director Spencer makes a non-committal sound, then addresses Harrison. And the legal perspective, Harrison shifts uncomfortably. "Technically, the emergency intervention was justified given the mayor's death in the F's condition, but long-term custody requires formal approval through proper channels." Director Spencer turns back to Charlie. "Miss Johnson, do you understand that this FO is a federally protected wild animal that, regardless of your personal attachment decisions about his future, must consider what's best for the species as a whole?" Charlie swallows hard. "Ma'am, but I also think what's best for Comet matters too. He was abandoned. He would have died now. He has a chance at life, a life in captivity." Director Spencer counters, "A life where he's loved and cared for." Charlie responds, surprising herself with her boldness, "where he can still be who he is. Just safer." Director Spencer's eyebrow rises slightly. After a moment, she says, "I'd like to speak with Dr. Fernandez before making any decision, and I'll need to review all your documentation again." "Does that mean you're considering letting him stay?" Charlie asks, hope flaring. "It means I'm gathering all relevant information," Director Spencer replies neutrally. "I'll have a decision by Monday." As they walk back toward the vehicles, Director Spencer pauses. Watching Comet follow Charlie along the fence line, his focus completely on the girl you've formed. Quite a bond, she observes. Charlie nods. He trusts me, and I promised I'd take care of him. Something in Director Spencer's expression softens, momentarily. Sometimes, Miss Johnson, the hardest part of taking care of wild things is knowing when to let them go. After they leave, Charlie collapses onto the porch steps, emotionally drained. What do you think? She asks Albert, who settles beside her. I think you did everything you could, he replies honestly. Now we wait. But waiting proves to be the hardest part of all. The weekend crawls by with excruciating slowness. Charlie spends every possible moment with Comet, trying not to think about Monday's looming decision on Saturday afternoon. As she's teaching him to step over small obstacles in the paddock, she's surprised to see Malene cycling up the driveway, again this time with a woman following in a sleek SUV. Charlie, Madeline calls, leaning her bike against the fence. This is my mom, Karen. Karen Evans is nothing like Charlie expected, where Craig Evans is loud and domineering. His wife is soft-spoken with keen eyes that immediately assess Comet with knowledgeable interest. Madeline's told me about your FO. Karen says, extending her hand to Charlie. I hope you don't mind us dropping by. Charlie shakes her hand, noticing calluses that speak of someone familiar with ranch work. Despite her polished appearance, of course not. Albert emerges from the barn, surprised registering on his face when he recognizes their visitor. Karen Evans, been a while. Albert, she acknowledges with a slight nod. Madeline's been talking about this Mustang nonstop, thought I should see for myself. Charlie leads Comet to the fence, the foe now more confident around strangers approaches, cautiously, nostrils flaring as he scents the newcomers. Karen makes a soft clicking sound, holding her hand palmed down other side. A gesture Charlie recognizes as one used by experienced horse handlers. Comet responds immediately, stretching his neck toward her. He's got good confirmation. Karen observes strong chest, good legs considering his premature birth. She glances at Charlie. Malene says, you're waiting on a BLM decision. Charlie nods. Director Spencer visited Thursday. She's deciding by Monday. Judith Spencer. Karen says thoughtfully, we worked together years ago before I married Craig. She studies Comet again. May I come in inside the paddock? Karen moves with the confidence of someone who spent a lifetime around horses. KT surprisingly accepts her presence without hesitation, trusts easily. Karen notes only with people who know how to approach him. Charlie corrects, he's still wary of most strangers. Karen nods approvingly. Good. A Mustang should keep some of his instincts. She watches as Comet returns to Charlie's side. Malene mentioned the bond between you two. It's even more apparent in person. Will that help with the BLM? Charlie asks. Hopefully. Karen's expression turns guarded. It might. Judith respects evidence. And what you've accomplished here is compelling. She hesitates, but there are political considerations too. Ranchers versus conservationists. The Mustang roundups have been controversial, so they might take Comet just to make a point. Charlie asks, anger flaring. They might, Karen admits, or they might see this as an opportunity to explore new approaches to orphaned music rehabilitation. She reaches into her purse and hands Charlie a business card. I still have contacts in the wild horse advocacy world. If Monday's decision doesn't go your way, call me after. Karen and Madeline leave. Charlie stares at the card in disbelief. Did Craig Evans's wife just offer to help us fight the LM? She asks Albert. Her grandfather looks equally puzzled. Karen used to be heavily involved in wild horse conservation before she married Craig. Guess some passions never die. Completely. Sunday passes in a blur of anxiety. Charlie barely sleeps that night, and Monday morning finds her sitting on the porch steps at dawn, watching the driveway for any sign of BLM vehicles. Albert brings her coffee, settling beside her. Charlie, whatever happens today, I know, she interrupts. I need to accept their decision. She looks at him, eyes burning with determination. But if it's the wrong one, I'm not giving up. Without a fight, Albert sigh. But doesn't argue. Dr. Fernandez arrives around 9, parking beside Professor Green's truck, which has just pulled in. Any word? Charlie asks immediately. They both shake their heads. Director Spencer asked us. Toby here when she delivers the decision. Dr. Fernandez explains that's all we know. The wait is torturous. Sheriff Howard stops by ostensibly to check on a different matter, but his concerned glances toward Charlie reveal his true purpose. Heard today's the big day. He says, just want you to know. The whole town's pulling for you, Charlie. Finally, at precisely 10. The government SUV appeared. Director Spencer emerges alone, carrying a folder and wearing the same unreadable expression as before. They gather in the living room. Charlie, Albert, Dr. Fernandez, Professor Green, and Sheriff Howard standing awkwardly by the door. Director Spencer takes her time, arranging papers on the coffee table. After reviewing all available information, she begins formally including Dr. Fernandez's medical reports, Professor Green behavioral assessments, and the extensive documentation provided by Miss Johnson. I've reached a decision regarding Mustang FOY 2467, known as Comet. Charlie's fingernails dig into her palms. The bureaucratic numbering of Comet feels like a deliberate reminder that in the government's eyes he isn't a companion, but property under normal circumstances. Director Spencer continues. An orphaned FO would be transferred to a BLM facility for rehabilitation and eventual release or adoption. However, this case presents several unique factors. She looks directly at Charlie. The FO has formed an attachment to Miss Johnson that, according to expert testimony, would make separation potentially detrimental to his development. At this critical stage, Charlie barely dares to breathe. Furthermore, Professor Green's search suggests that the rehabilitation approach being used here may have valuable applications for future cases. Director Spencer glances at her papers. Therefore, I am granting provisional approval for Charles Johnson and Albert Johnson to serve as licensed foster caregivers for Mustang FO WWI 2467 for a period of 1 year under the following conditions. She outlines a series of requirements: regular veterinary checks, continued documentation, periodic BLM inspections, and a clear understanding that Comet's long-term placement will be re-evaluated when he reaches 1 year of age. This is not an adoption. Director Spencer emphasizes it's a foster arrangement. For search and rehabilitation purposes, the BLM retains ultimate authority over the animal's future, despite the caveats. Relief floods through Charlie. A year. They have a year, thank you. She manages, her voice unsteady. I promise we'll follow every requirement. Director Spencer nods briskly. See that you do this. Arrangement will be closely monitored. She stands, gathering her papers. Professor Green will coordinate the research aspects. Agent Harrison will conduct monthly inspections before leaving. She pauses, her official demeanor softening slightly. For what it's worth, Miss Johnson, I believe you've done right by this. Just remember that your ultimate responsibility is to his well-being, whatever form that may take after the formalities are complete and the visitors depart. Charlie races to the barn. Comet greets her with his usual enthusiasm, completely unaware of how his fate has just been decided. In the house we did it, boy, she whispers, hugging his neck. You can stay that evening. As word spreads through Meadowbrook, a steady stream of visitors arrives bearing small gifts. Mrs. Palmer with special feed supplements, Sheriff Howard with an old saddle blanket. He thought Comet might like even Maylene and Karen Evans, stopping by with a handmade halter specifically sized for a growing foe. It's beautiful, Charlie says, admiring the braided leather work. I made it years ago. Karen explains for a Mustang filly I rehabilitated. She outgrew it quickly. She touches the soft leather wistfully. I kept it thinking, someday I might need it again later. Sitting on the porch with Albert, Charlie finally allows herself to relax. A whole year, she says. By then, they'll see how special he is. They'll have to let him stay permanently. Albert looks less certain. Charlie, you heard the director. This is provisional. When he's older, they might still decide. I know, Charlie interrupts, but we have time to prove ourselves now. Time to show everyone what Comet can become with the BLM's decision. Maid life settles into a new rhythm. Charlie divides her a time between school, homework, and Comet's development. Professor Green visits weekly, documenting every aspect of the F's progress for his research. Spring matures into early summer, bringing longer days and warmer weather. Comet grows rapidly, his spindly legs lengthening, his body filling out with proper nutrition and regular exercise. His coat gleams chestnut in the sunlight, and the white star on his forehead seems to grow more distinctive as his face matures. One particularly hot afternoon, in June, Charlie leads Comet to the small stream that runs through the back of their property. It's his first exposure to natural water, and he approaches cautiously, sniffing the surface before tentatively touching it with his muzzle. "It's just water," Charlie encourages Lycan. "Your bucket, only better." Comet paws at the stream, startling himself with their salting splash. Charlie laughs at his comical expression, then to her surprise, he deliberately paws again, harder, creating a bigger splash. "Are you playing?" she asks in disbelief. Comet repeats the action, seeming to enjoy both the cool water and Charlie's reaction. Soon he's splashing enthusiastically, even rolling in the shallow edges of the stream. He's playing. Professor Green confirms, lowering his camera. Charlie hadn't noticed his arrival. It's significant behavior. Healthy foes play, but usually only in the safety of the herd. He feels secure enough with you to show playfulness. Charlie beams with pride. He knows he's safe with me. As Comet approaches his 3rd month, Charlie begins introducing more structured activities following Professor Green's guidance. She creates simple obstacle courses that challenge Comet's intelligence and build his confidence. The goal isn't to train him like a domestic horse, Professor Green explains. It's to develop his natural abilities while maintaining his trust in humans. Charlie takes this approach to heart, focusing on rewarding Comet's curiosity rather than demanding obedience. She discovers he has an uncanny ability to problem solve, quickly figuring out how to navigate complex obstacles or locate hidden treats. "I've never seen a young Mustang with this level of cognitive engagement," Professor Green remarks one day after Comet successfully completes a particularly challenging sequence. It's as if he understands not just what you want him to do, but why. Melissa Johnson returns from her assignment in early July, shocked by how much both Charlie and Comet have changed in her absence. "He's almost a real horse now," she says, watching Comet trot confidently around the paddock. "He was always a real horse," Charlie corrects. "He's just healthier now." Melissa studies her daughter with a mix of pride and concern. "And you seem different too." Charlie considers this. "I guess I am taking care of him. Fighting for him, it changes you for the better, I think," Melissa says softly. With Melissa home, Charlie finally has someone to help capture photos and videos of Comet progress. Her mother's professional equipment produces stunning images that Charlie proudly adds to their documentation for the BLM. "These are beautiful, Mom," Charlie says, reviewing the photos. "They really show his personality." Melissa smiles. "He's photogenic." And the connection between you two practically leaps off the screen. The monthly BLM inspections, which Charlie initially dreaded, become routine. Steve Harrison seems increasingly impressed by Comet's development, though he maintains professional distance. Director Spencer reviews all my reports personally. He mentions during the July inspection, "She's particularly interested in your handling methods." Charlie takes this as a positive sign. "Does that mean she might consider letting us adopt him permanently when the year is up?" Harrison's expression turns guarded. "That's not a decision I can speak to, Charlie. There are a lot of factors to consider." Despite these occasional reminders of Comet's uncertain future, summer unfolds with a sense of possibility. Charlie begins taking Comet on short walks beyond the paddock, gradually introducing him to the wider world. With each new experience, the tractor starting, a plastic bag blowing in the wind, the neighbor's dog barking. Comet shows initial weariness, followed by growing confidence. He trusts you to keep him safe. Albert observes after Comet overcomes his fear of the flapping tarp on the barn roof. "That's the foundation of everything else." In mid-July, Professor Green proposes a new challenge. "I'd like to document how Comet responds to unfamiliar environments," he explains. "Would you be willing to trailer him to the university's Wyoming facility for evaluation?" Charlie hesitates. He's never been in a trailer exactly. Professor Green nods. It's the next step in his development, learning that new places can be safe too, as long as you're with him. After discussing it with Albert and Dr. Fernandez, Charlie agrees. They spend a week preparing Comet for the trailer, first just showing it to him, then encouraging him to step in while it's stationary, eventually closing the doors. For short periods, he's doing amazingly well, Dr. Fernandez comments. Most domestic Fies take much longer to trailer train. The day of the university visit arrives shot and clear. Charlie spends extra time with Comet that morning, explaining what's coming. Even though she knows he doesn't understand her words, it's going to be different and maybe a little scary, she tells him, stroking his now familiar star. But I'll be with you the whole time. I promise loading goes smoother than expected, with Charlie leading the way. Comet steps cautiously into the trailer, turning to her. For reassurance, that's it. She encourages, "You're so brave." Albert drives, slowly conscious of their precious cargo. Charlie sits in the back seat, positioned to see Comet. Through the small window connecting to the trailer he stands, steadily, ears flicking. At the new sensations, the University Eowyn Center is bustling with activity when they arrive. Students and faculty members move between barns, horses graze in paddocks, and the unfamiliar sounds and smells create an overwhelming environment. Comet bulks. At the trailer door, suddenly unsure, Charlie remains calm, giving him time to adjust. "It's okay," she soothes. "Look at me. I'm right here." Gradually, Comet's trust in Charlie overcomes his fear of the new surroundings. He steps down, pressing close to her side as they walk toward the round pen where Professor Green waits. "Excellent," he says, noting Comet's alert but controlled demeanor. Let's see how he adjusts to the space for the next tower. Charlie works with Comet in the round pen, gradually increasing the distance between them while maintaining their connection. Observers gather to watch, other professors, students, even a few ranchers invited by Professor Green to witness the unique approach. Notice how she never fought, forces him. Professor Green explains to the group the Mustang chooses to follow directions because of trust, not fear. By the time they finish, Comet is confidently exploring the round pen, still checking in with Charlie, but showing remarkable adaptation to his new environment. "This is groundbreaking," one of the other professors comments. "The implications for rehabilitation methods are significant." On the drive home, Charlie can't stop smiling. Comet handled everything beautifully, further proving how special he is. As the trailer turns onto their driveway, she feels a surge of hope. Surely now, with Professor Green's research and all their documentation, the BLM will see that Comet belongs with her permanently. But as Albert parks the truck, Charlie notices an unfamiliar car beside the house. A man steps out, one she doesn't recognize but whose official-looking attire sends a chill through her. "Mr. Johnson." "Miss Johnson," he calls as they exit the vehicle. "I'm Paul Davidson, Regional Supervisor for the BLM. I need to speak with you about a change in policy that affects your fostering arrangement." Charlie's momentary triumph evaporates, replaced by a sinking dread. Just when everything seemed to be going perfectly, the uncertain future she's been trying to ignore has suddenly arrived at their door. Charlie stands frozen beside the trailer, her hand still on the latch, as if keeping it closed might somehow protect Comet from whatever this BLM supervisor has come to say. "What change in policy?" Albert asks, stepping forward. Davidson gestures toward the house. "Perhaps we should discuss this inside. Whatever you have to say, you can say it here," Charlie insists, her voice steadier than she feels. Davidson sigh, adjusting his glasses. "Very well. I've been sent to inform you that due to recent budget cuts, the BLM is consolidating all Mustang rehabilitation programs. Foster arrangements like yours are being reviewed for potential transfer to centralized facilities." "Transfer?" Charlie echoes, her stomach dropping. "You mean taking Comet away?" "But we have an agreement for a full year. That agreement included provisions for policy adjustments." Davidson explains his tone. "Bureaucratic Director Spencer asked me to personally assess the situation before any decisions are made." Albert places a steadying hand on Charlie's shoulder. "When was this decided?" "The budget cuts were announced last week. The consolidation plan was approved yesterday." Davidson glances at the trailer. "I understand you've just returned from the University." Charlie nods numbly. "Professor Green called me." Davidson reveals he spoke highly of your work with the Mustang. "That's part of why I'm here, to see for myself." Charlie's mind races. This can't be happening. Not now, when Comet is thriving, when they've made so much progress. "Can we show you?" she asks, suddenly. "Can we show you what Comet can do? How well he's doing here?" Davidson hesitates, then nods. "That's why I'm here." With trembling hands, Charlie unlatches the trailer. Comet emerges cautiously. Immediately sensing her distress, he presses against her nostrils, flaring as he scents the stranger. For the next hour, Charlie demonstrates everything Comet has learned: his response to voice commands, his problem-solving abilities, the trust he's developed. Davidson watches silently, taking occasional notes. He's quite remarkable. He finally admits Professor Green wasn't exaggerating, so you can see why moving him would be a mistake. Charlie presses he's bonded Tome to this place. A facility would traumatize him. Davidson's expression remains neutral. I need to speak with Director Spencer. The final decision isn't mine to make. When will we know? Albert asks. By the end of the week. Davidson hands Albert his card. I'll be in touch after he leaves. Charlie collapses onto the porch steps. Adrenaline draining from her body. They can't take him. Grandpa. They just can't. Albert sits beside her, looking older than his years. Charlie, we always knew this was a possibility, but it's not fair. We've done everything right. Comet is healthy. He's learning. He's happy. Her voice breaks. Why can't they see that? This is where he belongs. Government agencies don't always work on what's fair. Albert says gently. They work on policies, budgets, and procedures. Charlie stares out at Comet, now grazing peacefully in the paddock, unaware that his world might soon be upended again. I'm not giving up, she says, determination, hardening her voice. If they try to take him, you'll what? Albert interrupts. Break the law, put yourself in legal jeopardy, put me in legal jeopardy. The question stops Charlie short. She hadn't thought that far ahead. There are other ways to fight. Albert continues more gently. Legal ways. Let's call Karen Evans and Professor Green. They have connections. Influence. Charlie nods, slowly pulling out her phone. This is too important to face alone. Within hours, their small ranch becomes a hub of activity. Karen arrives first, immediately making calls to her contacts in wild horse advocacy groups. Professor Green follows, bringing documentation of Comet's exceptional progress. Even Dr. Fernandez appears armed with medical records, proving the benefits of Comet's current arrangement. The consolidation plan isn't final yet. Karen informs them, covering the phone with her hand during one call. There's pushback from several conservation groups. Davidson seemed impressed with Comet. Albert offers that has to count for something. Charlie says little, moving between the house and the barn, checking on Comet as if reassuring herself he's still there. Malene finds her sitting in the paddock, Comet's head resting in her lap. Mom's talking to someone from the governor's office, Meline says, sitting beside her. Dad doesn't know, she adds with a small smile. Charlie manages a weak smile in return. Thanks for helping. Malene shrugs. Comet special. Even I can see that. The next morning, Charlie awakens to her phone ringing. It's Professor Green. Charlie, I've just spoken with Director Spencer, he says without preamble. She's agreed to meet with us this afternoon to discuss Comet's case specifically. Charlie's heart leaps. Us, you mean I can come too? You should be there. He confirms this is about demonstrating the unique bond you formed. Davidson's report was quite positive. By the way, the meeting is set for 3 Sombrius at the regional BLM office, an hour's drive away. Charlie spends the morning with it, trying to appear normal despite her churning anxiety. I'm fighting for you, she whispers, pressing her forehead against his. I promise. The BLM office is an unremarkable government building. Its beige walls and fluorescent lighting, a stark contrast to the emotional weight of what's at stake. Charlie, Albert, Professor Green, and Karen Evans wait in uncomfortable chairs, while a receptionist announces their arrival. Director Spencer emerges from an inner office, her expression giving nothing away. Thank you for coming, she says, formally. Let's talk in the conference room. The room feels oppressively official. A long table, surrounded by chairs, maps of federal lands covering the walls, a presentation screen at one end. Davidson is already seated along with 2 other officials. Charlie doesn't recognize. I understand there's concern about our consolidation plan as they relate to Mustang foe. Y2467. Director Spencer begins. His name is Comet. Charlie interjects, then flushes. All eyes turn to her rather than reprimanding her. Director Spencer nods. Comet. Then Professor Green has submitted additional research materials highlighting the unique aspects of your fostering methods. Director Karen Evans leans forward, speaking as someone with extensive experience in Mustang rehabilitation. What Charlie has accomplished with Comet is unprecedented, moving him. Now would not only erase that progress but potentially cause lasting psychological damage. One of the unknown officials clears his throat. Mrs. Evans, with all due respect, wild horses are adaptable. By nature, our facilities are designed for their specific needs. Institutional facilities can't provide what Charlie has given this FO. Professor Green counters the one-on-one bonding. the constant positive reinforcement, the individualized approach to his development. Charlie listens to the adults argue scientific terms and policy language flying over her head. Her frustration mounts until, suddenly, she can't remain silent. "Excuse me?" She interrupts, her voice trembling slightly. "You're all talking about Comet like he's a research project or a policy problem, but he's not. He's an individual, he has feelings, he has needs, and he trusts me." She pulls out her phone, showing a video she recorded just yesterday, Comet following her without a lead, responding to her soft voice commands, pressing his face against her shoulder in a gesture of affection. "This isn't just training," she continues. "This is a relationship. Comet doesn't just obey me. He communicates with me. He tells me when he's scared or confused. He looks to me for reassurance if you take him away." Her voice breaks. "He won't understand why he'll think I abandoned him just like his mother did." The room falls silent. Even Director Spencer seems affected by Charlie's emotional plea after a moment. She asks, "May I see more of these videos for the next half hour?" Charlie shares documentation of Comet's journey, from the fragile newborn, fighting for life, to the confident young Mustang he's becoming. She explains each milestone, each breakthrough, with the passion and knowledge of someone who has lived every moment of the journey. When she finishes, Director Spencer studies her thoughtfully. "You care deeply for this animal, I love him," Charlie says simply, "and I think he loves me too. As much as a horse can." Director Spencer glances at Davidson, who gives a slight nod. "Your case has merit," she admits. "But I cannot make exceptions based solely on emotional bonds. There must be objective justification for deviating from policy." "There is, Professor," Green interjects. "My research conclusively shows that Charlie's methods are producing results we haven't achieved in institutional settings. If we want to develop better rehabilitation protocols for orphaned Mustangs, we need to study this case further." Director Spencer considers this. "And you believe these methods could be applied more broadly with proper study and documentation?" "Yes," Professor Green confirms. "But removing Comet now would terminate the most promising research case we've had in years." The mention of research seems to resonate with Director Spencer in a way that emote appeals didn't. She turns to the other officials and they engage in a hushed conversation. Finally, she addresses the group. "I propose a compromise. The foster arrangement will continue under enhanced research protocols. Professor Green will expand his study to include regular evaluations at the university facility. The BLM will receive monthly detailed reports, and a final determination regarding permanent placement will be made at the 1-year mark as originally planned." Relief floods through Charlie. It's not a permanent solution, but it's a reprieve, a chance to continue proving that Comet belongs with her. "Thank you." She manages her voice thick with emotion as they leave the building. Karen squeezes Charlie's shoulder. "You did well in there, spoke from the heart, but also demonstrated your knowledge. That's a powerful combination. Will it be enough?" Charlie asks when the year is up. Karen's expression turns serious. "That depends on a lot of factors, but you've got allies now and evidence on your side back at the ranch." Charlie rushes to Comet, throwing her arms around his neck. "We did it, boy. You can stay for now at least." Albert watches from the fence, his weathered face a mix of relief and lingering concern. The battle has been won, but the war for Comet's future is far from over. Summer fades into fall, bringing crisp air and changing leaves. Comet continues to grow, his frame, filling out, his confidence increasing. The monthly evaluations at the university become routine with Comet, even seeming to enjoy the outings. He likes the attention. Professor Green observes during one session as Comet shows off his ability to navigate at a complex obstacle course he knows when he's impressing people. Charlie laughs. He's definitely not shy about showing off. The enhanced research protocol turns out to be a blessing in disguise. With the university's resources behind them, they can document Comet's abilities more thoroughly, creating compelling evidence of his unique development. Several scientific publications express interest in Professor Green's preliminary findings. They're calling it the Johnson method. He tells Charlie one afternoon, "Your approach to gentling without breaking spirit." Charlie blushes. "I wasn't using a method. I was just loving him sometimes. The best methods aren't planned." Professor Green replies, "They emerge from instinct and observation." In late September, an unexpected opportunity arises. The University is hosting a symposium on wild horse management, bringing together researchers, BLM officials, ranchers, and conservation advocates. I'd like Comet to be part of a demonstration, Professor Green tells Charlie, a living example of what's possible with the right approach. Charlie hesitates. Will there be a lot of people? He's never been around crowds. There will, Professor Green acknowledges, but we'll prepare him gradually, and your presence will reassure him after discussing it. With Albert and Dr. Fernandez, Charlie agrees. For the next 3 weeks they work on desensitizing Comet to new stimuli, different people, unusual objects, varying noise levels. He responds remarkably well, his natural curiosity, overcoming initial wariness. The day of the symposium dawns clear and cool. Charlie barely sleeps the night before, anxiety and excitement keeping her awake. What if Com panics? What if he makes a mistake? So much depends on showing how special he is. He'll sense your nervousness. Albert reminds her as they load Comet into the trailer. Remember to breathe. Charlie nods, forcing herself to relax. We've got this, she tells Comet, stroking his gleaming neck. We're going to show them all. The university arena is packed with people when they arrive, researchers in professional attire, government officials with badges, ranchers in worn jeans and boots, all gathered to discuss the fate of America's wild horses. Charlie's stomach tightens at the sight of Director Spencer in the front row. Professor Green meets them at the entrance. Perfect timing, we're on in 20 minutes. There's a warm-up area behind the arena. Charlie leads Comet to the designated space, letting him acclimate to the sounds and smells. Despite the bustling environment, he remains calm, his focus on Charlie unwavering. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Green's voice echoes through the speakers today. We have a unique opportunity to observe the Johnson method in action. What you're about to witness represents a new approach to Mustang rehabilitation, one that honors the animal's wild nature, while building trust-based human connections. Charlie takes a deep breath as they're introduced, leading Comet into the arena. The sudden appearance of so many people makes him hesitate momentarily, but a soft word from Charlie steadies him. For the next 15 minutes, they demonstrate everything Comet has learned. He responds to voice commands, navigates obstacles, shows problem-solving abilities, all without restraint or physical guidance. The crowd watches in stunned silence as this young Mustang born wild performs with the willing cooperation usually seen only in horses raised from birth in domestic settings. The key distinction, Professor Green explains to the audience, is that traditional training asks, how can we make the horse do what we want? While the Johnson method asks, how can we show the horse that what we want is also in its best interest? As they finish their demonstration, the arena erupts in applause. Comet's ears flick nervously at the sudden noise, but he remains steady beside Charlie. That was incredible. A woman near the exit tells Charlie as they leave the arena, I've worked with Mustangs for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like that level of willing cooperation. Similar comments follow them as they cool down in the preparation area. Researchers ask questions, ranchers express skepticism, but admit they're impressed, and conservation advocates practically glow with vindication. Director Spencer approaches last, her usual formal demeanor softened slightly. That was quite a demonstration, Miss Johnson. Thank you, Charlie replies, continuing to stroke Comet's neck. He's a good student, and you're clearly an exceptional teacher, Director. Spencer studies them both. Professor Green's research is generating significant interest. There are those who believe your approach could revolutionize our rehabilitation protocols. Charlie's heart leaps. Does that mean it means? Director Spencer interrupts gently, that your case is being watched closely. Continue the good work you're doing. Document everything. The final decision at the 1-year mark will take all this into account. It's not the firm commitment Charlie hoped for, but there's a new warmth in Director Spencer's tone that wasn't there before. As she walks away, Charlie allows herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, they're one step closer to keeping Comet forever. But nature, like bureaucracy, follows its own timeline, and the Wyoming winter approaching on the horizon will bring challenges no one could anticipate. Challenges that will test the bond between Charlie and Comet in ways that no symposium or research protocol ever could. October brings Wyoming first, frost painting the landscape in crystalline white each morning. Comet, now 7 months old, has grown into a handsome young Mustang, His chestnut coat thickens in preparation for winter, and his once gangly frame has developed. The powerful muscles characteristic of his wild ancestors, he doesn't even look like the same horse. Melissa remarks one morning, snapping photos of Comet racing around the paddock, his breath visible in the crisp air. Charlie beams with pride. But, still acts the same, still comes when I call, still follows me everywhere. The university demonstrations have become regular events, with Comet gaining something of a following among students and faculty. Professor Green's research has expanded to include 2 more orphaned foes being raised with adaptations of Charlie's methods, though neither has formed the remarkable bond that exists between Charlie and Comet. It's not just the method Professor Green explains during one of his weekly visits, it's also individual chemistry. Some humans and some horses just connect in ways science can't fully explain. As Halloween approaches, Sheriff Howard stops by with concerning news. We're looking at a harsh winter, he tells Albert as they stand watching Charlie work with Comet. And the paddock weather service is predicting record snowfall, maybe even some early blizzards. Albert nods grimly. We'll stock up on supplies. Make sure the generator's working. Sheriff Howard hesitates. There's something else. Craig Evans was at the town meeting last night talking about the wild herd, says they're moving closer to ranching land than usual might be. Sensing the bad weather coming, Charlie overhearing as she approaches. The fence frowns. The Thunder Basin herd Comets. Herd among others. Sheriff Howard confirmed terms. Evans is pushing for an emergency roundup before winter, says it's for the horses' own safety. But we all know he just wants them off potential grazing land. They can't do that. Charlie protests. The herds know how to survive winter. They've been doing it for centuries. Sheriff Howard shrugs, apologetically. Just thought you should know. BLM's sending representatives to assess the situation next week after Hell leaves. Charlie stands silently watching. Comet trot around the paddock. What are you thinking? Albert asks gently about Comet's real family out there. Charlie admits his father, his siblings, maybe if they round them up. Albert places a hand on her shoulder. That's not your fight, Charlie, but the worry lingers, adding another layer of anxiety to Charlie's already complicated feelings about Comet's future. 2 days later, the first winter storm hits with unexpected ferocity. What begins as gentle snowfall in the morning becomes a howling blizzard by afternoon. School closes early, and Albert picks Charlie up in the truck, the wipers barely keeping the windshield clear. This is a bad one, he mutters, squinting through the whiteout conditions. Radio says it might last through tomorrow. Charlie's thoughts immediately go to Comet, though he has a warm stall in the barn. This is his first experience with such extreme weather. As soon as they reach home, Charlie races to the barn, relieved to find it warm and secure. Comet contentedly munching. Hey, boy, she greets him, brushing snow from her coat. Crazy weather? Huh, the storm intensifies through. The evening wind rattles the windows of the ranch house and the power flickers several times before going out completely around 9. Good thing we got that generator serviced, Albert says, lighting lanterns while Melissa starts the wood stove. Charlie can't settle her thoughts, repeatedly turning to Comet. I'm going to check the barn again, she announces, pulling on her heavy coat. Charlie, it's dangerous out there, Melissa protests. The barn is secure. Comet is fine. I just need to make sure, Charlie insists. Albert sigh, recognizing the stubborn set of her jaw. Take the emergency radio and the lantern. If anything looks wrong, you call immediately. You don't try to handle it yourself. Charlie nods, bundling up in layers before stepping out into the storm. The wind nearly knocks her off her feet, and the snow is already knee in places. She struggles toward the barn, the lantern light creating an eerie glow in the swirling white. Inside the barn is significantly colder than earlier, though still shelter. From the worst of the storm, Comet whinnies when he sees her pressing his nose against the stall door. Just checking on you, Charlie tells him, setting down the lantern to stroke his face. Making sure you're a sharp crack, interrupts her, followed by a groaning sound that raises the hair on her neck. Charlie looks up just as a portion of the barn roof gives way under the weight of accumulated snow, collapsing inward with a thunderous crash. The section falls mercifully away from Comet's stall, but the horse panics, rearing and kicking at the sudden noise and rush of cold air. Charlie fumbles for the emergency radio with trembling hands. Grandpa, part of the barn roof collapse. Comet's okay, but another crack interrupts her. More of the roof is giving way, get out of there. Charlie Albert's voice crackles through the radio now. I can't leave Comet, she cries, moving to open his stall. Don't open the stall. Albert shouts. If he bolts, in this storm he'll die. Come, back to the house, we'll figure out what to do. Charlie hesitates, torn between obeying her grandfather and staying with her. Frightened horse Comet's eyes are wide with fear. His breathing rapid, I'll be back. She promises him. Stay calm, the journey back to the house seems twice as long, the wind having erased her footprints already. By the time stumbles through the door, her bass is numb from cold, the north section collapsed. She gasps as Albert helps her remove her frozen coat. Comet's stall is still intact. But he's terrified. We have to do something. Albert's expression is grim. In this weather, our options are limited. We can't repair the roof until the storm passes, but that could be days. Charlie protests. He'll freeze. His stall has 3 solid walls and a door. Albert reminds her, if we can reinforce the ceiling, somehow create a temporary barrier. They spend the next hour gathering materials, tarps, plywood from the storage shed, rope. By the time they're ready to head back to the barn, the storm has intensified further. I should go alone, Albert says, eyeing the white-out conditions. No. Charlie insists, I need to calm Comet. He'll panic more with just you. Melissa, who has been silent during their preparations, suddenly speaks up. I'm coming too. You'll need an extra pair of hands. The 3 of them struggle through the snow, connected by a rope to avoid separation in the blinding conditions inside the barn. The situation has worsened. More sections of roof have partially collapsed and the temperature has dropped significantly. Comet's stall, while still structurally sound, is now exposed to the elements from above. We need to work fast, Albert shouts over the howling wind. For the next 2 hours, they labor in freezing conditions, securing the top and plywood over Comet's stall to create a makeshift roof. The horse remains agitated, but Charlie's presence helps keep him from complete panic. That's the best we can do until the storm breaks. Albert finally declares, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. It's not perfect, but it should keep the worst of the snow out. Charlie strokes Comet's neck, noting the way he trembles. He's so cold. We've got those horse blankets from Mrs. Palmer. Melissa suggests they layer 2 heavy blankets over Comet, securing them carefully. Charlie brings extra hay to help him generate body heat through digestion. I'm staying with him, she announces as they prepare to leave. Absolutely not. Albert responds firmly. It's not safe, Charlie. He's terrified. Grandpa, if I leave him alone, if that roof collapses completely, you could be killed. Albert interrupts. I'm not risking you. Charlie looks at Comet, torn between her need to protect him and her grandfather's authority. Finally, she nods. Reluctantly, I'll come back at first light, she promises, the horse pressing her forehead against his. None of them sleep much that night, taking turns checking the weather radio for updates. The storm is predicted to continue through the following day, with temperatures dropping further. Dawn brings no relief, just muted grayish light filtering through relentless snowfall. Charlie is pulling on her coat before the others are fully awake. I'm checking on Comet, she announces. I'm coming with you, Albert insists, already reaching for his boots. The scene that greets them at the barn is disheartening. Their makeshift repairs have held but barely. Snow has found its way through, gaps in the covering creating small drifts inside Comet's stall. The horse stands huddled in a corner, his blankets dusted with snow, his breath coming in visible puffs. This isn't working, Charlie says, vow tight with worry. He can't stay out here. Albert surveys the damage to the broader barn structure. It's not safe to move him to another stall. The whole north section could go at any time. Charlie makes a sudden decision, then he's coming to the house. Albert stares at her. Charlie, we did it when he was a foe. She reminds him the mudroom has that wide door to the outside. We can clear a path, bring him in there. He's not a foe anymore. Albert points out he's a half-grown Mustang who trusts me. Charlie counters, who'll freeze to death if we leave him here. Albert studies her determined expression, then sigh. Let's talk to your mother. To Charlie's surprise, Melissa immediately supports the plan. The mudroom has concrete floors. We can put down straw. It's not ideal, but it's better than leaving him in a collapsing barn. They spend an exhausting morning clearing a path from the barn to the house. The snow continuing to fall as they work. By noon, they're ready to move Comet, leading a frightened horse through A blizzard proves even more challenging than Charlie anticipated. Comet bulks repeatedly, eyes rolling at the howling wind and disorienting. Whiteout conditions, only Charlie's reassuring presence keeps him moving forward. That's it, she encourages, her voice nearly lost in the wind. Just a little further when they finally reach the mudroom. Comet hesitates at the threshold, nostrils flaring at the unfamiliar scent. Charlie steps inside, gently tugging the lead rope. It's okay, she soothes. Remember, you've been inside before. Slowly, Comet steps into the mudroom. The space is cramped for a horse's size, but it's warm and dry. The straw they've spread, creating a comfortable footing. Most importantly, it's secure from the storm that continues. To rage outside, he made it, Melissa says with relief, helping Charlie remove Comet's snow-covered blankets and replace them with dry ones. Albert nods, looking both worried and impressed. Let's just hope the rest of the house holds up better than the barn. The storm continues for 2 more days, breaking records for both snowfall and low temperatures. Schools remain closed, roads impassable. The Johnson family settles into an unusual routine, taking turns tending to Comet in the mudroom, keeping the wood stove burning and monitoring weather updates on the emergency radio. Comet adapts to his temporary indoor housing, with surprising ease, seeming to understand that he's been brought inside for his protection. He stands quietly, accepting the limited space and unusual arrangements with a calmness that impresses even Albert. Never seen a Mustang this adaptable. Here marks on the 3rd morning, helping Charlie muck out the mudroom. Most would be climbing the walls by now. Charlie smiles, stroking Comet's neck. He knows we're trying to help him. When the storm finally breaks, the world outside is transformed snow blankets. Everything in pristine white drifts, piled higher than the fence posts in places. The barn stands partially collapsed, the damage even worse than they'd feared. It'll take weeks to repair, Albert says, surveying the scene. And with more storms predicted, Charlie watches his expression carefully so Comet stays in the mudroom. Albert runs a hand through his gray hair. For now, at least. Until we can get the barn assessed, we'll need to figure out a better arrangement for waste management. Charlie throws her arms around him. Thank you, Grandpa. As they're heading back to the house, the phone rings for the first time since power was restored. Melissa answers, her expression growing concerned as she listens. It's for you, she tells Charlie, holding out the phone. Professor Green, Charlie. His voice crackles through the line, reception still spotty. After the storm, are you all right out there? We're okay, she assures him. Barn roof partially collapsed, but we brought Comet into the mudroom. He's doing fine. Good, Professor Green says, sounding distracted. Listen, Charlie, there's something you should know. The BLM conducted an emergency roundup. During the storm, Charlie's stomach drops. The Thunder Basin herd, Comet's herd, yes. Craig Evans convinced them the horses were at risk. They used helicopters before the worst of the storm hit, but they know how to survive winter. Charlie protests. The same argument she'd made days earlier to Sheriff Howard, I know. Professor Green says grimly. But Evans has influence with certain officials. The herd is being held at the BLM facility outside of Sheridan. Charlie thinks of Comet safe in their Mudro, while his family is captured, confused, confined. That's not right. There's more. Professor Green continues. The roundup is receiving media attention. A reporter was embedded with the BLM team. They're doing a feature on Mustang management. How is that relevant to us? Charlie asks. Confused, the reporter heard about our research project about Comet. They want to include your story, ASA contrast to the traditional roundup approach. Charlie's mind races. Would that help with keeping Comet permanently? I mean, public opinion can be powerful. Professor Green admits, if people see what you've accomplished with Comet, how you saved him from this very storm that was used to justify rounding up his herd. I'll do it, Charlie says immediately. After she hangs up, she relays the conversation to Albert and Melissa. Media attention could complicate things. Albert cautions the BLM might not appreciate being publicly questioned, or it could be exactly what we need. Melissa counters. I've seen how this works in conservation efforts. Public interest creates pressure for policy changes. Charlie looks through the mudroom door at Comet, who watches her with those intelligent eyes that seem to understand far more than a horse should. It's not just about keeping Comet anymore, she says quiet. It's about what happens to all the Mustangs. His family. Maybe this is how we make a difference as another storm gathers. On the horizon, Charlie makes her decision the story of a girl and an orphaned Mustang surviving together through Wyoming's harshest winter in decades might just change more than their own lives. It might change the fate of wild horses across the state, and with that realization, Charlie Johnson, who once rescued a dying FO simply because she couldn't walk away, takes her first step toward becoming something she never imagined: an advocate, a voice for those who cannot speak for themselves. The reporter arrives 3 days later, a tall woman named Julia West from a national nature magazine. She navigates the snow-covered driveway in a four-wheel drive vehicle, equipped with chains, camera equipment, visible through the windows. Quite a setup you have here, she comments, eyeing Comet through the mudroom door. When Professor Green told me you had a Mustang living in your house, I thought he was exaggerating. Charlie stands protectively near Comet. It's temporary until we can repair the barn. Julia's eyes soften. I'm not here to judge, Charlie. I'm here to tell your story. From what I understand, it's a remarkable one. Over the next 2 days, Julia documents everything: the collapsed barn, the makeshift accommodations, Comet's unusual behaviors. She photographs Charlie working with him in the snowy paddock. They've managed to clear interviews Albert about the night of the rescue and speaks with Professor Green by phone about the research implications. What made you decide to save him? Julia asks Charlie, as they sit at the kitchen table, steaming mugs of hot chocolate between them. You must have known it would be challenging. Charlie considers the question. I didn't really decide. I just couldn't leave him there to die. She pauses. It felt like he was meant to find me as much as I was meant to find him. And now her has been rounded up. Julia prompts, how does that make you feel? Sad? Angry? Charlie stares into her mug. They would have survived the winter, they always have. Rounding them up was about ranching interest, not the horse's welfare. Julia nods, making notes. Craig Evans has been quoted saying wild horses damage grazing lands and compete with cattle. Mustangs were here first. Charlie responds, an edge to her voice. They're part of this landscape. We've just forgotten how to share it with them. On the final day of Julia's visit, unexpected sunshine breaks through the clouds. The temperature rises just enough to begin melting the top layer of snow, creating a glistening landscape, perfect light for final photographs. Julia declares, gesturing toward the open area behind the house. Could you work with Comet out there? Show me what he can do. Charlie leads Comet outside the horse, stepping carefully through the snow. Despite the cramped conditions of the past week, he's maintained his fitness, prancing excitedly in the open space as Julia photographs them. Charlie puts Comet through the exercises they've developed together: voice commands, problem-solving challenges, trust-based movements. The Mustang responds perfectly, his bond with Charlie evident in every interaction. He seems to read your mind. Julia remarks, adjusting her camera lens. Not my mind. Charlie corrects, my body language, my tone. He pays attention in a way most people don't. Julia lowers her camera, studying them both. You know, he came here expecting to write about unconventional Mustang rehabilitation. But this is something more. This is about connection across species. Charlie smiles, stroking Comet's neck. That's what Professor Green keeps saying, that understanding this connection could change how we work with all wild horses and potentially save many from roundups and holding facilities. Julia adds thoughtfully after Julia leaves, promising the article will appear within a month. Charlie feels a curious mix of hope and anxiety. Public attention could help there.